had this article, which is one of the first things I want to go over. Jenny Whittaker's Doctor Who episode almost brought the Autons back. Writer Pete McTeague revisits the episode with RadioTimes.com. So, for those of you who don't know, I think this is in reference to Praxeus. Jodie Whittaker's 13th Doctor faced every manner of Doctor Who monster, but she almost faced one more classic foe in the season 12 episode Praxeus. Writer Pete McTeague has confirmed that the episode which saw the Doctor Yaz spelt incorrectly for some reason. It's spelt as Yas, like Yas Queen. Don't know why. Graham, Bradley Walsh, and Ryan Tosin Cole investigating strange phenomena was originally supposed to include Autons. If you don't remember, Praxeus was essentially like this thing where like there was alien plastic, there was like a virus that was spreading via plastic, which was kind of funny because weeks after broadcast, the COVID lockdowns happened. So weirdly prophetic of what was to come. As he revisits season 11 episode Kablam for his novelization, he told RadioTimes.com about the inspiration for his stories. With Praxeus, I really wanted to do a plastic story about the impact of plastic on the planet, and I also wanted to do an Auton story. Originally, that was going to be an Auton story. That will not surprise you to know. I think also the Autons get mentioned in it. It didn't become that, which is a shame, but I'm pleased. It was weirdly prescient because it was about a pandemic 2 years before it happened. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. McTeague added, what did happen to the Auton side of it? I think at the time, we were looking at the series as a whole, and Chris Chibnall was deciding whether there were too many old elements. I mean, he clearly didn't stick to that looking at the rest of his episodes, but anyway. So it went out the window quite early on, and I think the things we wanted to do with it, we wouldn't have been able to achieve on the budget, which was also a problem I had. I think you need a bigger budget to do that. So yeah, the main thing to take away from this is that Praxeus was meant to be originally a Auton story, which is interesting. I am on record as saying I find Praxeus really, really dull. I know it has its fans. I'm not one of them. I'll give it this. It incorporates its environmental themes much better than Orphan 55 did, which basically just sort of has a monologue at the end. With this, it feels a bit more organically woven into the story. However, I still just find it really quite boring. And yeah, like personally for me, I do think maybe the Autons could have made it a bit more interesting, because one of the things I'd say that like a lot of the Chibnall were lacked in terms of its one-off episodes is like villains that were like memorable. And I think with this, I think they're like humans, but they're not humans. You know what I mean? They're human actors, but they're like aliens. And like you don't remember them. I don't remember them. And maybe the Autons would have helped kind of with the iconography of it a bit. But I don't know. It's interesting nonetheless. But in other Doctor Who news, much more devastatingly, Peter Davison reveals scrapped plans for a Fiveish Doctor's reboot follow-up. So yeah, this came out a couple of days ago, and I really wanted to cover it on stream because, for those of you who don't know, I mean, it might be some of you who don't know what the Fiveish Doctors is. The Fiveish Doctors was basically a skit written and basically starring Peter Davison, which was basically a skit about how the classic Doctors weren't in the 50th anniversary, and it was kind of their scheme to get inside the episode, right? Really, really funny, really, really well made. A lot of jokes that were, really, really funny for the time. There's lots of jokes around the music and stuff like that. It's a really, really fun time. If you haven't seen it, I believe it's still on the BBC website. I believe you can still access it. But for years, people have wondered, with the new anniversary on the horizon, will we get a reprise of the Fiveish Doctors, a sequel in some form? And it seems like the answer to that question, unfortunately, is a no. And we're going to be getting into that in a sec. And I must say, the reasoning for why did catch me off guard a bit. So yeah, he spoke about the prospect of a new skit for the 60th anniversary. Fifth Doctor Peter Davison has exclusively revealed his plans to create a follow-up to his 2013 sketch, The Fiveish Doctors Reboot, for this year's 60th anniversary of Doctor Who. The original skit celebrated 50 years of the legendary show and featured Peter Davison alongside 6th Doctor Colin Baker and 7th Doctor Sylvester McCoy attempting to sneak their way into a role on the coveted 50th anniversary episode. I'm so used to saying 60th at this point, Day of the Doctor, with guest appearances from Doctor Who alumni such as David Tennant, Paul McGann, Matt Smith, and a whole host of companions. The film was a success and beloved by fans around the world who hope to catch a glimpse of past Doctors and friends for the anniversary celebrations. Speaking on the prospect of a follow-up 60th anniversary spoof, Davison and his wife, author Elizabeth Morton, have confirmed that a sketch was planned but eventually scrapped. I came up with an idea. It was deemed by those I showed it to as utterly unacceptable, although I thought it was very funny. Davison said, "It's a different world now, and I am always, I wouldn't say pushing the boundaries, my sense of humour is maybe a little out of sync with the sense of humour that now exists. The pair went on to discuss trying to top the original version and what it would take to create something just as brilliant and celebratory. It was so perfect and it just evolved. It started off small, Peter was just going to film himself, but the whole thing became suddenly you'd go, Ian McKellen has agreed to be in it. Peter Jackson said, pop by, it was phenomenal.
Yes.
To get that perfect storm, I think it would diminish the Fiveish Doctor's original. To try and do it again, said Morton. I wouldn't have wanted it to do it any way unless I thought it could be as good or better than the original, said Davison. So in the end, it became very clear that there were just too many compromises I'd be asked to make in the making of it, and I thought just best to leave it alone because the original is perfect. Davison told me directly that his idea involved them thinking they'd done the entire thing, but the BBC cancels it due to lack of diversity. So he goes to the BBC bar, passes every single remotely diverse actor that ever appeared in Doctor Who. When he sits back down, it's been greenlit. Yeah, a bit ropey, you know? Again, Davison, lovely man, but, you know, obviously sensibilities are different. Probably for the best, if that was the intent. Apparently it was about political correctness. Yeah, that is sort of the vibe that it gives off, and maybe it's for the best, because you just know that that would have just caused a whole bunch of things. But then again, I would have liked to have seen a sequel, because I do think there's genuine like value in the idea of, because obviously David Tennant is coming back as the Doctor, and obviously the classic Doctors themselves, the classic Doctors having come back in power. Obviously Russell T Davies is coming back as well, and the last sketch ended with a scene of Russell T Davies being there, being like, oh, can I be in the Fiveish Doctors reboot? I don't know why I can't do a Welsh accent. I'm literally Welsh. Matthew Purchase, who's kind of my go-to for like the classic Who news when it comes to like Twitter, at least, obviously, you know, in terms of like the big documentaries. I love what Josh Schneider does, but anyway, as reported on Gallifrey-based Apple TV are currently listing these episodes as available on BritBox with proper synopsises. Mythmakers 2 and 4, Smugglers 2 and 4, Highlanders 2, Space Pirates 2, 5 and 6. Of course they aren't on the surface, but it's a very strange thing to happen. I don't believe they're up anymore, but they were up when I've clicked this link previously. So it's interesting to see these missing episodes pop up. Now there has been mention, and I'll see if I can find it as well, of like some of the 10th planet also having been found. Also worth noting that Galaxy 4 Episode 4 is also listed as the only episode from the serial. Whilst it has been animated, it's yet to appear on BritBox, although there is a separate iTunes listing for the animation. And interestingly, this takes us to 9 episodes, which is strangely the same number the Mirror article reported on last week. So yeah, there was a Nicola Metvin article saying that 9 Lost Doctor Who episodes have been recovered. Now, the reason I didn't put too much stock into this at the time is because it was done by the Indiana Jones of Doctor Who collecting, as he refers to himself, Philip Morris, who can be a very unreliable narrator when it comes to these things. However, given that it's done by Nicola Metvin, who tends to have a really good track record with Doctor Who stuff, perhaps that lends some additional credibility to this. So I think that's really interesting. But I mean, hopefully there's some more classic episodes. I would always love more classic episodes to be recovered. I don't think there's any Doctor Who fans who are like, oh no, I don't want more to be recovered. Hopefully there's some legitimacy to it. I never reported on classic Who missing episodes before, because honestly I wasn't sure whether people in my audience would care as much, because I tend to cover like new series stuff predominantly. But I made that one classic Who episodes potentially having been found video, which was a guy's collection being found, and it did really well, and you guys really seem to be interested. So yeah, there's the latest update on that. So in case you haven't seen, obviously it's also John Pertwee's birthday today. So happy birthday to John Pertwee, legend, of course. We also had Ncuti Gatwa marking the occasion. On his Instagram story, he said, I mean, drip unparalleled, icon inspo, basically saying that John Pertwee is an icon and inspiration, and his fashion sense was impeccable. And yeah, I mean, it makes sense coming from Ncuti, because he is arguably the most fashionista Doctor since Pertwee. So it was very cool seeing him celebrate Pertwee in this way. And I just really like having a Doctor on social media. You know, I think it's just really fun. Very 21st century kind of, you know, it just feels like Doctor Who's being up to date in a way that it hasn't been when the stars are on social media in this way. I really dig it. So yeah, it was just really cool to see him celebrate that, and yeah, I love this man so much. I think he's absolutely gonna rock it as the Doctor in series 14 and beyond and the 60th. And that's not just because I met him. I've thought that before then, but also the guy was also just super charismatic when I did meet him. Obviously, you don't get to say much because obviously there were loads of people there saying hi and all the rest of it. However, as a man, gotta say, he was very charismatic, and I was very I'm very excited to see him on screen.